And got a proclamation to read. It's an Arbor Day proclamation, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of the business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas Monmouth has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting endeavors, whereas trees are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and now, therefore, I, Steve Milligan, Mayor of the City of Monmouth, do hereby proclaim April 28, 2018 as Arbor Day in the City of Monmouth, and I urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and to support our city's community forestry program. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. In the witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Monmouth to be affixed on the 28th day of April 2018. And with that, I don't have anything to report tonight, so I'm going to move on to the reports from council representatives. So, Councilor Silvernagel.
Short report here. The Arts and Cultural Commission did not have quorum, so no meeting.
All right, thank you. And Councilor Belts.
So I went to my first meeting as a counselor liaison for the library board, and Chris Obrist, who is the librarian, reported on some need to do some more policy review, and she said she'll be creating a timeline to work on that and report back. She discussed their volunteer application and the volunteer policy, and then the board approved the new application. She said that their Craft with a Cop drew 90 people, and they were very excited about that, and they hope they can do more events like that. Friends of Library discussed some of their activities. They've updated their mailing list. They're trying to streamline their donation process. They'll have a spring book sale May 4th and 5th. And they said that they plan on having a booth at the 4th of July Festival at the park. And they have an event coming up. There's a 21 and over wine and poetry event with a limited number of spaces left. It's happening April 21st. There'll be Western professor Henry Hughes and a special guest poet, Jen Richter, professor at Oregon State University, who will be reciting poetry. Wine tasting provided by Eola Hills Winery, along with light refreshments. Seating's limited, pre-registration is required. Drop by the library and reserve your seat. ID is required, 21 and over.
Thanks. Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, we had the historic commission on Wednesday the 4th, April the 4th, and what the deal was that we're getting ready for the next month. May is historic month. It's not just for Monmouth, but it's a very important moment, but it's for the whole country. So Saturday the 28th, or maybe it's the 30th, we don't know the set date, but they were looking at it, to put the display up in the library, which quite a bit was put into that, and I think a lot more is going to go in by the time he gets in there. And so that'll be up. Plus the banner should be up by the 1st of May, across the street, that tells us that we'll have historic month. May 5th is the first breakfast at the senior citizens, and this is not senior citizens breakfast. This is a breakfast for Monmouth put on by the senior citizens. I get that right this time. Anyhow, we're going to try to have some information or some people there to help people understand the walking of the signage of our apps on the phones. So you could, if you got done with breakfast, you could walk to town. There won't be a display there this year. There won't be any items like that. The big concern this year on historic was to try to get more houses in town on our national register. And so right now it's we have a workshop date set for May the 23rd, I think at the bed and breakfast. Am I right? That funding went through, and they're going to have people over there, and there'll be information put out. So anybody that's interested in getting their house on the National Register can come in and see how many hours it takes and what it involves and if your house qualifies. So everybody's pretty excited about that and historic about being able to get some more houses on the National Historic Register. And it's pretty extensive because it's an average 150 hours just to get qualified, plus all the other things that go with it. And one thing we're working on is on historic walking tour signage. We hope to have quite a few of the signs in the windows for this historic month. Not permanent plaques, but signs that people know that this building was on the historic register. Okay.
All right, thanks. And Councilor Schenkel is not here, so any community announcements? Hearing none. Scott?
Yep.
It's your turn.
First item up, spin bikes, if you've seen orange bikes around town. That's a program that rolled out on the western campus, and they're basically app-based, and you can use them for $1 an hour. There's a couple different options. The whole idea is instead of having docking stations, you can just really go wherever you want. When you're done with it, you're done with it. They've obviously got out in the community pretty quickly. They get contained at campus. There's been a mixed response, we can say. Some people are like, hey, cool new service, get people to be more active, that's great. Other people do not like the bikes being left, on a sidewalk or in the street or just someplace. So we're getting lots of calls to the police department, come pick up these bikes. It's like, it's not really, that's actually somebody's property. It's not an abandoned bike. It'll get used. And so it's going to be interesting just how that kind of rolls out. But at some point, they could expand out to the community, so we can make an option to reach out to them and actually say we'd like to support the program. So we'll see how everything goes. Highway 9, we have our crews in place now, so actually actively in the streets with the water project and then the electric project. Those are actually going live right now, so we'll have more disruptions around the roadway, and we'll see how everything goes there. WU capital projects, there's usually always something going on campus. They do a good job refreshing their buildings, and so Larry being really busy right now, we got one big set of plans coming in. Now they said they got a couple projects coming right behind that, so that'll just keep adding to the workload, but keeps everything going, keeps going fresh. One thing to note on the volunteer recognition for the library was last Saturday, and as they've noted, they run 2,000 hours of volunteer service there. Every now and then you hear a comment, well, people don't volunteer in Monmouth. It's kind of like, yeah, they do, and you get about an equivalent amount at the senior center, let alone all the other people that help, so that's really good. And then a note about the senior center, first time that we know, the Easter Bunny came to the senior breakfast. And that kind of surprised people, so that was fun. Unfortunately, our director got the comment about what's your next costume. She's not so sure it's a continuous activity. So with that does it.
All right. That brings us to citizen comments.
I've had about 3 or 4 comments on the bicycles, and I've seen them all over the town park. And I don't know who has a committee on it. Maybe they put the phone number on there, people could call and say your bicycles, at the campus. That's one thing
That's an interesting one, because what we found out is if you have a concern about something, you have to log on, get to the website for the company, and then try to wade through to find a phone number. Maybe if there was an easier way, that would probably be better.
You stencil it on the bike or something.
Yeah, something.
Perhaps because the bike shop is actually a partner, perhaps the bike shop could put their number on there, so at least
Maybe,
there's
yeah.
a
I
place
think
for people
it's
to
just
call.
good. It's just good feedback,
Right.
because they're interested in making this program work too. So that'd be good. Just let them know, and I'll pass that along.
The concern is that the bikes are abandoned for like long periods of time?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, and the interesting one though is if it goes too long, the company has no interest in having bikes not used. So they monitor, and if they see a bike sitting in place, I don't know what their parameters, maybe it's 2 or 3 days, they'll go pick it up and then reposition it back at a place where they think would work. So they're not just going to have it sitting someplace and just not being used.
And my understanding is some of the concern is also the bicycles are being left on people's private property. They're being left in people's
Right.
yards, and I don't think that's the intention. And it's just going to be an education process for the students. And the students need to remember that just because they're riding a spin bike doesn't mean they don't have to follow all of the laws and rules that they've always had to
Yes.
follow riding bikes.
That's
So it'll just be an education process, and we'll continue to reach out to the campus to make sure they.
Yeah, I think there's, if I recall correctly, isn't there a fairly, so there's a sort of a substantial, because I think you're ultimately to return those, to one of the racks.
No,
You've got
because
some
they're
time.
they're dockless. That's the idea, is if you see one and you're registered, you can get on that bike, even if someone else had just ridden it there. That's the point of it, is you can use them wherever they are.
So,
there was a proximity thing that they needed to have. You know, there's a lot of that in Portland, you know, the bike town bikes.
And the
they've
first
got
ones
growing-
were the docking stations. So like say in our case, you'd have one at campus and have a docking station in Burgerville.
Yeah.
And you'd be point A, point B, you have to park it
Yeah.
there. The new concept is this, and these are getting rolled out all around the country, which is a lot more flexible.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
My understanding is I think they each have a GPS chip of some kind on, so when you hit the app, you can see where the closest bike is. But
But the people that have it marked in the front yard of the sidewalk, they just want to know if they have to turn it in or not. That's all they're just wondering, it's sitting there for a day, they're just wondering what's going on.
All right, so that brings us to citizen comments. This is the time reserved for citizens to comment on items that are not on the agenda. Maximum of 3 minutes per item, please. If you wish to comment on a specific agenda item, please sign on the sheet provided at the back of the room. Anyone like to make a comment tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations, and our first one is from Sheriff Mark Garten.
Hello. Thanks for the opportunity to come in and just briefly talk. I have something to keep me on track so I don't get too far off track. It'll get there. So the reason I'm here is I really just want to come and share information about what we've been doing over the past year at the Sheriff's Office. Sometimes a lot of people don't know or just assume or guess some of the things we do and what really, truly the scope of some of the things that we're required to do and some of the things that we do out of necessity. So over this last year, we really have put an effort into public engagement in terms of going out and talking with different groups, whether city council meetings, neighborhood watch groups. We do training in the schools. We do training for CASA, the court appointed special advocates. Victim impact panels. We really try to do whatever we can. If people ask of me to come or any of my deputies to come do something, we try to do that, try to accommodate, because that's what our job is, at least that's what I feel. And so, I might have killed it. So I'll just keep going. Does everybody have this copy? Okay.
It's in the packet.
Oh, it's in the packet?
It's coming.
Oh, there we go. All right. So within the Sheriff's Office, we have primarily two divisions, and Patrol Division and the Corrections Division. And so everything that we do falls under these two different divisions. Under state statute, there are certain things that I'm required to do. One of those is to provide a jail, search and rescue, court security, civil process, which is like subpoenas, any kind of court documents. I'm required to process those and serve those as well. So within our jail, it's a 195-bed facility. It really can hold 204, but we literally have 195 beds. There's a few bunks that are missing, so in theory we should do 204, but on average, you know, we're in the about 130s on an average daily population. But last year we almost did 3,000 bookings. So throughout all the different agencies that participate and bring folks to us, they come drop them off, and then they're my responsibility for health care, making sure they're safe, getting them to court, everything that is statutorily required. And then these are the numbers that from the different agencies that provide the inmates and intakes. And so my patrol staff was 719 intakes last year, which obviously is up from the previous year because now we're at full staff. Prior to that, we weren't necessarily at full staff. We were a couple short in 2017, or in 2016 versus 2017. So our numbers are up. My estimate is that it's going to maintain pretty close to this number. We won't see that big of an increase from next year. Our average daily population in the jail is 132. And so the other thing a lot of people don't know is our average daily length of stay is 19 days. We don't have a ton of folks that are sentenced to up to a year. That's what we're able to do. Out of those 132, probably 120 or so are the 19-day length of stay, and the other ones are the up to a year sentence. So it's a pretty quick turnaround on average. Our female population's up as well. It's been going steadily up the last 3 years. We're not any different than any other jail across the state. It's very, very similar in terms of numbers. There's nothing I can specifically say that the reason the female population is up, except that they all seem to have a drug nexus to them. Most of the inmates that come in have some kind of drug or mental health nexus, but the female population seems to always have some kind of drug nexus. In our jail, we have 75 volunteers that come in throughout the year, sometimes a couple times a week. They do various programs, AA, NA, different kind of church services depending on what is requested or needed. We're pretty flexible on that, but we have these programs every week. AA is twice a week, NA is twice a week. There's church going on just about every day in different religions throughout the week. So these volunteers are great. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. So you guys probably know, but in 2015, that's when we were only working 10 hours a day, and that's when the public safety levy passed in May. And so in January of 2016, we went to 20 hours a day, and then later in 2016, about halfway through, we went to 24 hours. That's also when the point team became operational as well. So some of the numbers that I'll talk about, you'll see some drastic increases, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening more. We're just able to be more effective and go out and actually find these things. Last year, my deputies responded to 24,413 incidents. It's a little up from last year, so about 4,000. Of those, 2,800 of them were criminal reports. And then our arrests are up 875 versus 611 last year. 911 calls, we don't have any, they just come in, we don't have any say over those. Those are up as well. I think a lot of that has to do with folks knowing that we're available versus in the past where we're only working 10 hours a day, so they may not have called, but I think more people are using that. They know we're there, so they'll call. I get asked too a lot about traffic citations, quotas, those kinds of things. We don't have quotas, never have, never will as long as I'm here. So this is just where the numbers landed. About a third of all traffic stops, and we did 6,100 of them last year. About a third of them received a citation. The other 2/3 were written warnings. And so we did about 1,500 more stops than the previous year. But I think because part of we're out doing more enforcement, our traffic crashes are down by almost 200 versus 2016, which we've never had a decrease like that. We were able to go back and research. It's never been that drastic, but I think it's because we're out being visible, we're making stops, we're doing enforcement action. So we'll see where those numbers go, if they maintain that or not. So I just threw these picked out for some of the crimes, and to me, all these have some kind of drug-related nexus. And so I broke it down by year so you can see the change, but they're all increased, even from last year to this year, or 2016 to 2017. Our overall crimes are up too. I mean, in terms of, we had 1,900 last year, and in 2016 and 2,400 last year. So just the overall DUIs are up, thefts are up, anything that's drug related is up. The DUIs, in my opinion, have always been there. We're just being able to be out there and enforcing them and catching them. The DUIs with marijuana components are up as well. Once again, those have always been there, but we're just able to be proactive and out and finding them. But the whole point of this, the reason I show this is the crime is there. We're being visible, being proactive on some of the things that we do, and we're able to find these. The only crime that really went down across the board is burglaries to residences. So just everything else is up. Our mobile crisis team, it's a mental health related team. They started in September of 2016. So 2017 is really their first full year, so we don't have a lot of data in terms of comparing years to years, but this team goes into every city, including West Salem. There's 2 teams, and the team is a deputy and a mental health professional, and then there's a Salem police officer and a mental health professional. They work Polk County, so sometimes you'll see Salem Police in the city of Monmouth or out in Fall City. If they're not on, we'll go into West Salem and handle the calls. That's how this is a grant-funded program. And so last year, they responded to 504 calls. Some people might not think that seem like a lot, but they're not quick calls by any means. They're very, very time-consuming, some 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, depending on the circumstance. So then I broke it down by cities, and you can see kind of where Monmouth fits into on the lower end compared to everywhere else. But once again, this is open for any agency to call and ask for our help. And one thing that I am able to compare is with these types of calls in the past, when we didn't have this program, we didn't have a lot of options in terms of dealing with folks that have the mental health issue. We either took them to jail, took them to the hospital, or did nothing. That was really our option. So a lot of folks ended up in jail. Not necessarily the best place for them, but there was a crime. They were able to put them there and fix the problem that was at hand. About 30% of those calls, those folks ended up in jail. With this program, we're about 8% of the same kind of calls that we go to. So that is a significant decrease because these folks are able to start services right then. They're able to get safety plans. They're able to deal with a person when they're in crisis. Because when you deal with someone in crisis, regardless of what it is, it's more effective to start treatment then than it is to let them get out of crisis and then they don't feel like they have a problem or they don't need help, so they won't go seek treatment. But if interventions happen at this time, which they're able to do, services, obviously there's a direct result. I mean, we have less folks going to jail that don't need to necessarily be there. There's other treatment for them. So this is a good program. We're funded again, so it's a 2-year grant. We just got it again, so we're through 2019, the end of 2019, we'll still have this program. We'll reapply for it. Marion County's been doing the similar program for the last 15 years on the same grant, and so it's a year after year program. So all this to say, we're really busy. I mean, we're full staff. We're able to do more things than we've ever been able to do, and that's purely because of the public safety levy. If we didn't have that, I mean, we would still be at the 10 hours a day and be hurting. But I hope that people can understand there is some return on the investment that was made, and that's the whole point of this, is that, yeah, we're out doing our job, but we're also able to do a lot of proactive, preventative things as well, because that's part of what I feel is my job, to make sure that, you know, we can address recidivism if we can, which we are. And we just got a grant actually through the Justice Reinvestment Program. We're actually going to have, in our jail we call it residential treatment, but folks that are sentenced to a year or less that have a mental health or a drug-related dependency program or problem, we're actually going to have treatment, intensive treatment, daily treatment in the jail through this program. A provider will come in and actually do that. So we've never had that before, and that's going to probably start midsummer is probably when that's going to roughly start. We've been approved for the grant, so it's just a matter of getting the pieces in place now. So we should see, hopefully, out of this some pretty good results. We're doing something similar as another county has done, so we're not paving the way. We're just tweaking it for Polk County. So. Does anybody have any questions about anything we do, or just really quick overview just of what we've been doing, but be happy to answer any questions anybody has about anything we're doing or not doing, or anyway, really, I'm open.
I have two. First, a comment. Thank you for being here. I know when you first came aboard, you made a commitment you're going to get to each of the cities and to meet with city councils and talk about the kind of things that you all are doing, and so thank you for following up on that. It's good, it's nice, and this is good data. Just a couple quick ones. You're operating the jail population. This has to do with the jail. You're at about 60% capacity, 65% capacity maybe. And I know that's going to vary.
Yeah.
Do you provide beds for other jurisdictions that may be suffering overcrowding in their jails? You know, you hear about the catch and release thing, and they can't hold them because they've got, you know, there's overcrowding and all that.
We don't do that for another jail. We do have a contract currently with U.S. Marshals for federal prisoners, not ICE. It is purely U.S. Marshal holds. We started that last month. We had 34 inmates throughout the, not necessarily 34 at one time, but
Right.
throughout the month. And so they pay per bed per day. And so yeah, we do have that. We've never done that in the past, so this is a new thing. But we have the room. If it ever gets to a point where we're taking on other custodies from outside Polk County, that'll stop. I mean, the primary goal is for Polk County people being held responsible here. If we have room, great, we can subsidize some of our costs, but if it ever gets to a point where I'm kicking out local folks, which I won't do, we'll stop the other programs and take care of our county first.
Didn't we not do that at one point? I mean, like 8 or 10 years ago?
There's been a jail that remodeled a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago. Maybe it's been longer than that, but they remodeled, and so we held a few
Yeah,
while they were
sure.
doing, and then shipped them back. But it wasn't a long-term. It was just a very, very short-term thing.
What's the reason that that's not, it doesn't sound like that's done. Well, I mean, is there a jurisdictional problem? Is there a legal problem? I mean, it seems to me like you could, I mean, you're renting beds in effect. I mean, that's a revenue generator. If you have capacity, and I understand clearly.
We've been approached by a couple different jails, and then ended up not by our own issue, but them stopping the process. But yeah, we offered it up because we have the ability now, and that's why the U.S. Marshal thing came up, and we pursued that. So if there was other jails that needed it, yeah, we'd talk, and we've talked. It's just never penciled out for them. So
In other words, there's no real substantive, or that there's no real definitive reason that you don't. It's just that it just hasn't come up and hasn't.
it just hasn't worked.
Last question, you've got a huge uptick, 16 to 17 in the DUIs, 84 to 182 in 2017. Are you doing any data collection or any research on that there's a pretty good public campaign of, against this? The numbers here indicate that it's a continuing problem. Are you looking, is there anything that's coming up?
I don't, and maybe I misunderstand, but I don't, the numbers from 2015, I mean, we weren't being proactive, we weren't out there. I mean,
I understand that, but
2016, 16, we were half the year, we were at full staff, or 24 hours a day. And so I think the ability now versus 2016 is we have everybody off training on their own, solo, by themselves, out working, and so we have more people on the road than we did in 2016.
Sure.
And they're out there stopping cars. I mean, our increase in traffic stops are there, and the more contacts you make, the more DUIs you're going to find. I mean,
And it's good that you are. But I guess what I'm wondering is when people renew their liquor licenses here in Monmouth, we always get a report from our police staff that, whether there's any issues with the property and all of that. I always wonder, well, how many people will drive away from a particular place and when they ought not to be. And I guess there's not a good way for you to find out where they've been drinking. Now, they might have just been drinking in the backyard. But, if you get somebody that's coming out of John's Tavern all the time and you're stopping them, it'd be nice for us to know that.
We do. So during the arrest process for a DUI, there are questions that are asked about where you've been drinking, if they tell us the truth.
Yeah, sure.
And so if there has been in the past problems with a certain establishment out in the county, then we report that to OLCC and we work with them. So I mean, there is a way to get it back to the license authority.
Do you report back to cities if there's a problem in a town?
I can't say that we have, but I also don't know if there's been an issue.
Yeah.
That's something I can look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You had a question, Rob?
Yeah, no, thank you again, and I'm glad you got a renewal on this grant for your mobile crisis. I think that's really good. You brought it the last time you were here. We discussed this great ideas, I mean, We'd rather meet those people someplace besides the jail, which is not gonna help anybody, you know, the jail. Another question is, on our levy, are we to the max on the levy now?
No, sir.
Where are we at?
Are you talking
Yeah.
the assessed value?
Mhm.
So we just went through budgets
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. It was going to be 38 cents.
Yeah.
Max is 45. We haven't ever done 45, and we're not planning on doing anything more than what we're currently doing. It actually is going to be, the numbers aren't there, but it's going to be actually around 30 cents. And the reason being, the ONC timber funds from back in the day, though, it's revived a little bit. They're sending money for 2016 and 2017, nothing for future. They're just sending some retro stuff, and so that's going to reduce that. The commissioners have agreed to do that because they promised that through the levy process. So it's going to be around 30 cents this coming year.
I think it'd be good information to put out. I mean, everybody's always asking that question. you
Yes.
know, and,
So I did that on, not on this, I didn't even think about it, but I did a year-end report, which is on our website. There's a video as well. It talks about how much the assessed that we've done throughout the year, and we haven't ever maxed it out.
Right.
So that is, I'm proud of that part because doesn't always happen that way with government. So,
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you too for coming, it's very interesting. When you have drug arrests, do you see one particular drug over the others that's more common?
meth and heroin.
Meth and heroin? How does that compare to other counties in Oregon? Is it about the same?
I would be guessing, but I'm guessing it's very similar. Heroin, so heroin is on the rise. I don't think it's at the level of methamphetamine now, but it is more prevalent now than it was 2 years ago. And so, but I know the heroin problem is a statewide, US-wide. It's not just here, but it's on the rise everywhere. So it's very similar in price too. So that's the other part. But I don't have that data for compared to other counties.
Are your officers trained to administer Narcan?
Yeah, we work with West Valley Hospital, and they provided doses for all my deputies. So everyone carries 2 doses. 2 weeks ago, we had a save. One of my deputies showed up in the city of Dallas. Their ambulance and police department wasn't available right at the time, but he was right there, stopped, gave 2 doses of Narcan. The guy popped right up because he was overdosing on some kind of opiate. So it works. I mean, yeah.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah. I believe every county or every agency in the city also now carries Narcan. So
Yeah, that's good.
it's a good program.
I don't see murder up here. Nobody gets murdered in our county, huh?
Drug related. These were drug related, like methamphetamine and marijuana connected.
So there were life-threatening crimes that have been committed over these last 3 years?
That we have had murders, yes.
Oh, okay,
But-
how do you categorize those?
I picked these out because of their drug related nexus.
I see, okay.
Everything that has a drug related nexus is on the rise. That's,
Okay. Okay, good. I was thinking maybe nobody got murdered here.
Unfortunately not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When is the decision made to use the MCRT? Is that when somebody calls 911 and says, I think such and such is having a mental health issue? How is this called out?
Yeah, so whatever agency gets the call initially, so whatever jurisdiction, they'll respond, get there, determine, hey, if our mobile crisis is on, because we only work 10 hours a day, every day, they'll get there, make a determination, call us, and then we'll come. That's initially how it is. Sometimes the mobile crisis teams will hear it come over to the radio, and they'll head that way to begin with, but the agency, whoever is responsible, is the one that makes that request.
I'm just so glad to hear it's available because we hear about it so much. I'm glad it's here.
Yeah, me too.
So one of the things that we do directly with each other is the courts. Can you talk a little bit about the video arraignment and how well it's been going on?
There's no issues, not that I know of. We've probably been doing it 1.5 years, I'm guessing, somewhere around there. It works for us because it's we don't have to process inmates out and bring them back in. It's more work if we can just take them over to the room that we have that set up. And we're doing that with not necessarily courts, but we're doing other video things too as well. So it's just more efficient all the way around. But no issues that I know of.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't concerned that there was,
No, I hadn't heard any, so if you're like.
Yeah, I haven't heard any either,
Good.
but I just wanted to, so it really has been an effective program for both us and for you.
I know it is for us, and I'm sure it is for the city, the police department. They don't have to drive over, and I mean, it saves everybody time, so.
Good. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before you go, did you want to speak anything to the current levy or current bond that's coming up for the county?
I
It will
can,
affect your offices, won't it?
briefly, yeah. The bond for the courthouse, it's for the courthouse complex, I'll see you guys, by itself. 9.7 million over a 15-year period, and it's 11 cents per thousand assessed value. Yes, it'll affect my office. I mean, just an easy way to look at it, for the amount of people I have, I don't have enough lockers for everybody. So I mean, there's people that don't have lockers that just kind of change out in the area, and so that's just we have too many people for my area. I mean, we really do have a small office, so they're able to, if this passes, they're able to reconfigure it to make it more efficient. They're going to do some exterior work to the annex, the newer part of the side of the courthouse, hopefully to new windows and siding, because I mean there's leaks in my office. When it rains, there's water that drips through on the inside. So there's a lot of work that's been deferred over the years. It just never got done, and so they're trying to get that fixed. So in theory, the way it looks, I've just seen a drawing, but it's gonna look really good and very similar to the historic side. So it's gonna all flow really well. So
All right, thanks.
thanks.
And our next presentation is going to be from the Fire District Chief Ben Stange.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Ben Stange. I'm the Fire Chief of Polk County Fire District Number 1, which provides fire and EMS services to the citizens of Monmouth. I know on the agenda later on there's something about demolition procedures. Myself and Deputy Chief Olson are going to stick around for that, so we can talk about that at that time. I want to talk about this May, in a few weeks here on the ballot, there's going to be a levy that our Board of Directors voted to place on the ballot. Did I send out a copy of this letter? I know a couple of you have received it, but I'm not sure if that went in the packets. I'll leave a few copies here, and it'll explain everything I'm saying. We also have, I appreciated the Sheriff's presentation, so I'll just do a quick plug here. We have a new revamped website, polk1.org, and we have our year in review on that. I'll certainly consider coming and doing that for the city if you're interested in that next year. But you can access that there.
Is that the numeral 1 or letter 1?
The number 1, POLK and the number 1. Trying to post as much stuff as we can get out there, information about this levy that I'm going to talk about, year in review, our standards of cover, which is what we want to provide, how fast we want to provide it, and where we're going to do it. All those types of things, just to try to get as much out there as we can for the public to see. But about this levy, I want to talk about the amount that it is, what will happen if it fails, and what will happen if it passes. So the amount of the levy that's going to be on the ballot in a couple weeks here is going to be 19 cents per thousand. The fire district currently receives a levy of 19 cents per thousand. If this passes, it will continue the current taxing rate. If it fails, obviously that tax won't be assessed. This makes up about, this 19 cents that we currently collect is about 8% of our total budget for the fire district. About 63 comes from our permanent tax rate, another 28 comes from our ambulance transport, and then about 8% comes from this operating levy. So that's the amount of it. Basically, if it fails, what we'll do, first of all, and we're trying to make it real clear, we won't have to lay anybody off. We'll lose no full-time personnel if this levy fails. However, currently the way that we staff, we have 3 firefighter paramedics on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. During the day, we have 4. If this levy fails, on some days during some hours, when we have people who are sick or on vacation, rather than hiring back to fully fill those shifts through either overtime or part-time temporary employees, we will not fund all of those vacancies. So there will be no layoffs, but there will be some reductions during some hours of the day to a different minimum staffing standard. The second impact is we won't be able to fully fund our equipment replacement plan. This is our ongoing fund that goes to purchase our big items, our things like ambulances, our cardiac monitors altogether cost about $150,000 to replace, and you have to do that. Our portable radios are about another $150,000. Our air packs are $300,000. So that's the fund that goes to pay for those types of items. So there are those two major items, and then it'd just be small things spread across the budget that we have to reduce in order to compensate for that 8%. Now, if it does pass and continue at the current taxing rate, we do three things. The first is we would hire one more full-time firefighter paramedic. As I said, right now we have 4 on during the day and 3 on at night. Because of the way the contract works with the labor union, by bringing one more firefighter on, we can move those people who work during the day to 24-hour coverage at their same pay rate. So essentially we end up with 84 more hours of coverage with 4 firefighter paramedics, so we end up with that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the first thing. The second thing, back in 2012, the fire district laid off their full-time fire marshal. So this levy would allow us to hire a part-time fire marshal to oversee some of those responsibilities. And the last thing we'd be able to do, I talked about the equipment replacement fund. The rest of it would go to meet the minimum needs of the equipment replacement plan during that. I know I just spouted off a ton. I apologize, the letter didn't make it in your packets, it looks like, but I am going to make sure that everybody here gets a copy, and I brought a ton of extra copies for everybody in the audience. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have regarding any of that or the fire district in general.
This is kind of a dumb question, but how's a fire marshal different from a fire chief?
Thank you. So a fire chief ultimately has to, sort of the responsibilities of the fire marshal fall to the fire chief, which is why I've gotten to know a lot of city officials in the last year and a half. But the educational tracks for firefighters and fire marshals are very different. Fire marshals are very code-oriented. They're into the minimum flow rates for this thing and that thing and widths of driveways and building heights and all that type of stuff, whereas firefighting and paramedicine is obviously a different thing. So what we've done, if you don't mind, what we've done, and the fire district's done it since 2012, is gone out and actually held classes for our shift personnel, for our firefighter paramedics, to get them certified to do some types of basic inspections. And they've been going out in the community and trying to do that. But it's at a fairly basic level. But they've been doing a good job of that, and we're hoping that combined with a part-time fire marshal who could oversee that and take care of some of the more complicated things would be able to meet that need.
Thanks.
Just quickly, do you have a levy that's expiring, or is this just a continuation? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so the one that we're collecting right now, which is 19 cents per thousand, we actually will collect for one more fiscal year. This levy would not go into effect for one more year.
Right.
So it's basically so that we know 1 year out that if we're going to have these cuts, we need to start addressing it now. And if we're going to be able to change things, we can do it in advance. But it would continue at the same rate as it currently is, that 19 cents.
That's why, that's good strategy. Now, the thing that stumps me a bit here is you're really gonna, this component of your budget, this 8% of your budget, is going to remain basically the same. The rate's going to remain the same. I would assume that the amount collected is going to be pretty close to the same, yet you're adding personnel, buying more new equipment. And why are you doing that now?
In the last 5 years, we've had a 42% increase in call volume. For the last 3 years, our ambulance service revenue, because of the changes in Medicare, have stayed the same. Out of a $750,000 ambulance transport revenue, approximately, in the last 3 years, it's only fluctuated about $4,000 each year, despite last year we had a 12% increase in call volume. So the reason we're looking at it now is because of our call volume. We aren't meeting our standards of cover when it comes to the frequency that we're needing to call in ambulances from outside jurisdictions. So when we have the resources available, and I'd be happy to, a lot of this is in our standard of cover in our year in review, so I'd be happy to come in and show it to you. When we have the resources available, we're able to meet a lot of our timelines in that. But when we don't have the personnel available, when we have too many overlapping calls, last year almost 28% of our calls were overlapping. And so when we're short on staff, obviously it makes it very hard to run more than one simultaneous call.
Will this increase then? I mean, obviously it will if you're going to be, but if you're basically, it will be a continuation of what you have now in terms of that component of your revenue.
Yes.
Yeah, that 8% is going to remain the same. In a year, you're going to be able to add more personnel with the same amount of money. I'm confused why you can't add that now if you have this amount of money in.
Oh, I understand.
This year and then next. That's not quite. It's next.
If we hired, so we could afford to hire somebody for 1 year. Yes. If we hired them and the levy failed the next year, we couldn't collect on it. Basically, it goes from needing to, I'm sorry, I just misunderstood. It goes from needing to cut some staffing during peak hours to actually needing to lose a position because we're operating at a deficit. But yeah.
Okay.
And if it passes, we wouldn't actually wait for the new one to go into effect to make that staffing change. We would actually make it this next fiscal year. We just want to know if it's not going to pass.
Don't want to hire somebody to lay them off.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Thank you.
On your fire marshal, doesn't the state help you out on that too, though?
We have absolutely an incredible Deputy State Fire Marshal. Her name is Shannon Miller. If you ever see her, thank her because we have nobody internally who is certified to inspect schools, healthcare facilities, manufacturing plants, all of Western, any of those things. Shannon does all of that in addition to me just calling her and asking her to sit in on things like a hotel going in Independence. She covers all of Yamhill, all of Polk, and all of Lincoln County. So she is absolutely fantastic with her time. And they do what they can, but they obviously are very thin.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to our business agenda. And our first item is first reading of an ordinance adopting legislative amendments 18-01.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So if you recall, at your last meeting on April 3rd, we had a public hearing to consider legislative amendments 18-01. This is an amendment to adopt the Monmouth Local Wetland Inventory and the related changes to the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan and City Code. So we have at that hearing, the council recommended or voted to approve that, and so now we've prepared the ordinance to formally adopt that, and you have the first reading before you tonight. You'll see as part of the ordinance, there's 3 exhibits. Those exhibits are what you had in your packet for the hearing. No changes were made to that. So you've got the final local wetland inventory, the proposed changes to the comprehensive plan, and then the proposed changes to the Monmouth City Code. So happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
Any questions? Hearing none, I'll read this for first reading. An ordinance adopting the Monmouth Local Wetlands Inventory, amending the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan, and amending the Monmouth Zoning Ordinance. And I declare it's passed its first reading.
What's the ordinance number?
Oh, we'll get that at the second reading. And our next item of business is a request for funds for planning consulting services. Yeah.
Hi. So, yeah, as you'll recall, council set a goal to look at the lands inside the Monmouth urban growth boundary and establish a path forward on making sure that the city's residential lands in particular are being met. So this has been an ongoing project, long-range planning project that Mark has started with the Planning Commission. I had a chance to meet with the Planning Commission and carry on some of that work, but it has kind of been a start-stop because it's one of those ongoing long-range planning projects, and we've had an uptick in the amount of current planning development activity that's going inside the city. So I just was looking back at some of the planning applications, and applications in 2017 doubled what we had in 2016, and then this year, 2018, we're on track to potentially surpass 2017. So they seem to be just trekking along, which is a good sign of the economy, but it's been taxing for me as staff to try to keep a consistent, efficient process moving forward on the long-range planning project. So we have kind of a unique opportunity where we could get some short-term consulting services to help us move this urban growth boundary planning process along a little more quickly and efficiently, and that's through some of the budget staff savings through the community development department. So some of the things that we envision this person would be helping us with is, so far the Planning Commission has worked on a draft land inventory and some draft housing needs forecasting, but we're getting into the stage where now we need to work on some of the actual plan and code changes, and looking at potentially making some changes or adjustments, not necessarily an expansion of the urban growth boundary, but some adjustments of potentially swapping out lands that may not be as ready for development right now, and others that are closer to that readiness of coming in for development. So certainly we will have a work session, in the future with the council to bring you up to speed on what the Planning Commission's been working on. We have another work session this Wednesday night at our next Planning Commission meeting. We'll be looking at some housing goals and policies, and then we're planning to get some public comments and comment from potentially affected property owners. So Envision will be coming to council here in the next month or two to have that work session and bring you up to speed on what we've been working on. But this would just be, like I said, a good opportunity to try to move forward this council goal a little bit more quickly and get to some action on that item. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. We've anticipated that it's looking at probably 100 to 158 hours of work. We worded that contract so that it was a not to exceed a $10,000 amount. And then we have obviously drafted to make sure there's some key checkpoints in there on what deliverables we're looking for. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ron?
Yeah. The person is an intern? Is it somebody going to hire from COG? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out where this person's coming from.
Right. So no, it's a person that has 20 years of planning experience. So yeah, this UGB work is very technical, and the findings addressing the various administrative rules and statutes is definitely not something that an entry-level intern would necessarily be ready for. So yeah, that was one of the advantages of Wells, that we know somebody that has some capacity to take on some work that is highly qualified.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Roxanne?
So why is this person, I see it says a very qualified planner has offered his services at a discounted rate. Why is he offering them at a discounted rate?
It's a planner that is getting established and private consulting work that has worked on the local government side. And so, yeah, they're kind of building their client base right now. So there's a window of opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
What was our, so I was reading when you did your introductory comments, but what was our plan to do this in the beginning, so to speak. I mean, this has been a goal of ours for 2 years now. And was that just going to be like go to work, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think that the prior plan is it just had to get worked into everything else the community development director does. And so we knew it was always going to be kind of a chip away process trying to get through. And then I think what Suzanne noted was the workload on the real kind of the live planning side got worse. And so that's where we're trying to address this. We did have discussions of by the time we got some of this initial work done, when it went to actually developing really all the findings to take to the state, we would more than likely go to the COG and actually contract for those services.
So when we would get right then, well, first of all, we'll probably make our own determination whether there's much chance of that.
Yeah, so all the work to get to that point, we need to make sure what we're doing, what
Yeah.
decisions we think are best, getting our base work done. But then when it got down to the documents that you need to go to the state, then we turn that over to somebody else.
So that would be another contract.
Yeah,
with the
that'd be another-
later.
yeah.
Well, I think we, personally, it's just my own, but I think we need to do this. This has been a goal of ours for 2 years now, and, well, 4 years, okay. Well, but actually, maybe 4, but we also sort of we took a look and said that's gonna happen, so we sort of backed away from it. But we need to put our money where our goals are. And, you know, this is, I don't know if there'll be any budgeted funds in the, you know, the 18-19 budget, but there ought to be. That's a goal. We ought to fund our goals. And so this is an opportunity. I mean, just to expect that we can get it out of Hyde, it sometimes will work, but this isn't one of those times, in my opinion.
Well, I look, like, the money's already there, we've already approved it in the budget, this is not, we're not digging into the, you know, this will be handled, let's get a start on it, that's what I'm with John, it's
Yeah.
time to get a start on it.
So do I hear a motion?
Can I just say one thing? Last year, Councilor Steinke and I attended a very good League of Oregon Cities training, and among the people speaking were representatives from Woodburn who wanted to change their urban growth boundary. And it took them about 3 hours to explain all the things that they did. And then the last thing they told us was that it took them 25 years. So I'll be dead before it's done, so.
Woodburn was particularly aggressive in the way they approached
But I think
it.
it was over 400 acres.
That was a different kettle of fish, I think, when we were looking
Right,
at
where
it.
your planner, Woodburn, might have that presentation to just look at and see the kinds of things they consider. It was a very interesting presentation.
Yeah, UGVs in Oregon are very interesting.
So do I have a motion?
I move approval of using up to $10,000 in general fund contingency funds to acquire planning services to assist in the urban growth boundary analysis.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call please, Phyllis.
I don't have a roll call for that, but we can.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, Counselor Shermer,
Yes.
Counselor Silbernagel,
Yes.
Counselor Carey,
Yes.
Counselor Beltz,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. And we'll move on to our next item. And this is the transient occupancy tax revision. And this is
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Our illustrious city attorney brought to our attention that our over 10-year-old transient lodging code needs some updates for this July 1st. And so we've gone through and made those adjustments. Primarily, they deal with updating some terminology to bring it current with, as you know, our one of our challenges with transient lodging taxes is all of these intermediaries on the internet. And so that's primarily what it does, is it updates some of that language. Additionally, it gave us an opportunity to bring our tax collection timing in line with what our current practices are. And so it's hopefully a fairly straightforward update to the ordinance, and looking for your approval. But any questions, we're happy to take.
Any questions, Ron?
Yeah, this would, I know this is just plugging in spots that work, you showed that. Will this also address the people in town that are renting their houses for a week at a time or 2 weeks?
Well, they're already subject to the ordinance.
They are subject
If they're working,
yeah.
if they're going through Airbnb or home, VRBO, it certainly clarifies our ability to collect those. But people who are renting their homes on their own, they're already subject to it. That's just a matter of enforcement,
Okay,
catching.
And the enforcement is the challenge.
Yeah.
right, well, yeah, I understand that, yeah.
And so my understanding is Airbnb is collecting it, we just may not be getting it.
Possibly so, exactly.
There were some glitches in state law that at least gave those intermediaries an argument that they didn't have to, and those were the loops, those were the openings that were closed in the February session of this year. Goes into effect in July. We're aligning ours with state law so that we sync up with that.
Any other questions? So this is an ordinance amending certain provisions of the Monmouth City Code relating to transient lodging tax, and I declare it as its first reading. And we'll move on to item number 4, is to adopt a resolution extending workers' compensation coverage to volunteers.
Correct, and this one hopefully is even easier than the last one. Essentially, CIS, our insurance agent, approached us and said that there was a missing bullet from our resolution that we adopted in June relative to the fact that we do tree planting. We thought we were covered by the fact that we had the tree advisory board on here and Parks and Recreation as non-public safety volunteers, but tree planting is enough of a I guess, risk that they wanted to have it called out. And so we've just literally added a bullet to the previous resolution. And so we're hoping that you'll pass that. It doesn't change the cost at all. It's just a more explicit coverage.
And this is a resolution extending this City of Monmouth's workers' compensation coverage to volunteers of the City of Monmouth and repealing resolution number 1844, and this is resolution 1860. Are there any questions?
I move to approval of resolution 1860, which rescinds and amends resolution 1844 to add tree planting volunteers to the covered list for the purposes of the city's workers' compensation insurance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just one quick question. Sorry, I didn't read this through thoroughly enough. Does it also cover other kinds of outdoor arbor-related stuff like planting bushes and shrubs and?
Yes, that's our understanding, is that we've now hopefully globally covered the volunteer
Okay.
situations that we know about.
Okay.
Any other questions? Roll call, please, Phyllis.
Counselor Phelps?
Yes.
Counselor Carey?
Yes.
Counselor Silvernagle?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Sharma?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. And now we're on to council comments. If there's any councilors who'd like to make a comment, Roll.
I have one, I talked to John Kerry about this, and he was gonna beat me to it if he was gonna say, I was gonna back you up. I've walked the streets, and I really think it's nice that all these people, I'm pretty sure they've been served notice that their sidewalk was, needed to be repaired. And it's amazing the amount of people in this town that have gone ahead and started repairing sidewalks. And I think we ought to thank them for it. It's their dollar, not ours. And we've asked them to help make the city better and safer. And I don't know if we do it in the flyer, that we do with our monthly bill, or if we just thank them. But there's a lot of money been spent out there fixing sidewalks already on their dollar.
Well, it's mayor's notes or what?
Yeah, something.
Are you seeing new ones, or these ones are like we've done last summer?
No, they're right now.
It's interesting because we're not doing active notices right
Well,
now.
they're doing it on their
So
own.
that's what I'm trying to get at. I think people are doing it, which is awesome.
Yeah,
That's what I
but
was
this,
trying to
you've seen them dug out, staked off,
Okay.
concrete.
Yeah, we can do
I
something.
mean, I don't think any of these are from last year that I've seen. Have you,
Okay.
No, there's several
Okay.
new ones.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of, that might be a stimulus for others to do the same without, the heavy hand of the city coming in on.
Yeah.
It's great, yeah, I've noticed this, Earl and I both noticed that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just to note while you're on that subject, is remember we're going to have an intern go through the whole city, inventory everything. They spent so much time building the model that could be used that we didn't get much of the inventory done. We have a second intern now that will fill in the actual data and get that inventory taken care of.
Right, yes, nice. Any other comments? So for the flow for the rest of the meeting, well, what I'm going to do is read the script for the executive session. What we'll do is we'll recess the council meeting to go to our work session. When we're done with our work session, then we'll come back into regular session to deal with the executive session. And I'll read that comment right now. Script to announce the start of executive session, April 17th, 2018. The City Council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing labor negotiator consultations and consideration of exempt public records and trade secrets. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, labor negotiator consultations, and ORS 192.6601F, consideration of exempt public records, and ORS 192.5012, trade secrets, which allows the council to meet in executive session. Designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back to the room. It is not anticipated that action will be taken this evening after returning from executive session. So do I have a motion to recess this meeting to move to work session?
Move we recess.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll reconvene at the back of the room.